Spar, Vismami, say, Visa Darby, Saleh, Salos, make the Shabrit, Ayla, the Kalba, Kasa, Shirasa, Tushba, Kasa, Nakasa, Dami Ramba, Mavi, Romain, Hey, Slamaba, Miximaya, Bachaim Aleno, Bakra Israel, Romain, also Shalom, Rama, Uyasir, Shalom Aleno, Bakra Israel, Amen.
Friends, we're going to begin in just a couple minutes. Before we do, let me just ask you to make sure that you have a couple things that you're going to need. One is a sitter to participate in the Tfilah Chagigit and Ma'ariv. Second, everyone should have a source sheet. If anyone is missing a source sheet, they were on the seats, but if anyone is missing a source sheet, let me ask you to just identify yourself, and we'll make sure that someone provides you with a source sheet. I'll just remind everyone, please, at this time to silence their cell phones. Begin in just a moment. Yossi Levine. No. We'll signal you as soon as regular. Much else. I'm sure you're so excited. I've done it again. We'll make it work. Okay, friends, we're just about ready to begin. Let me ask everyone to please find their seats. We're just leaving that because it's such a hassle to take it up and down. We need it for Myra's. Yeah, Myra's right in here, right after. That was the only. He's gonna such a pleasure. Such a pleasure to welcome everyone to this special program. We're honored to be partnering with our friends at Yeshiva University to celebrate ha-Atzma'aut. Our relationship with YU goes back many decades. The relationship actually predates the state of Israel, the modern state of Israel. The connections are many. In addition to being my teacher and mentor, Rabbi Schacter was for 19 years the rabbi of the Jewish Center. Rabbi Menachem Penner is the Max and Marion Grill Dean of the Rabbi Isaac Elchanan Theological Seminary. Max and Marion Grill were longtime members of our center. Our two institutions were instrumental in helping support the state of Israel both before and after its founding, and it's so fitting that we've come together tonight to honor Medinat Israel once again. I want to thank my friends and colleagues, Rabbi Ezra Schwartz and Rabbi Eli Buchler, for putting all of this together. It's a bracha to be able to celebrate Yom HaAtzmaut together in person. We take none of this for granted. Yom HaAtzmaut hasn't actually yet begun. Today is Yom HaZikaron to begin our program with the recitation of the special memorial prayer for the fallen soldiers of Israel. I call upon the Chazan of the Jewish Center, Cantor Jonathan Green. I'll ask everyone to please rise. Amsei menuchane chana tachas konfi hashechina v'mahalot kedoshim uteharim kesohar harakim asiri lenishmot chalei milchamot Yisrael asher masru nafsham al kedushat Hashem v'al kibush haaretz. Ana bal rachamim asirei meseter kadafech li'olamim utzor b'tzorachem et nishmatam Adonai unachalatam v'yanuchu b'shalom al mishkaham v'nomar amen. Be seated. I am Rabbi Menachem Penner. It's wonderful to be back on the West Side, so many familiar faces, and to continue the historic relationship between Yeshiva University and the Jewish Center. Tonight's lecture is the Lena and Harry Kabikoff lecture, and is part of a relationship of the Kabikoff-Wexner family, which Susan Wexner will speak about in just a moment, and part of the Bella and Harry Wexner Kol Elyon program. The Kol Elyon features some of the greatest young minds in our community today, who, in addition to continuing their study at yeshiva, are learning how to become the leaders, the spokespeople of tomorrow. We had a wonderful conference on Sunday, focusing on Israel and values that emerge from this very important Shemitah year. And it is really our great pleasure at REITs to be able to host the Kollel and to have this ongoing relationship. The ceremony that we had just before the event, we offered awards to two of our alumni, to both Rabbi Yosef Bronstein, who is a writer in Israel at this point, still part of the faculty of Yeshiva University on Zoom. Rabbi Scott Hoberman, who was here from Charleston, wonderful example of our young rabbis heading out to various communities around the country and around the world. It is my great pleasure to call upon Ms. Susan Wexner to say a few words to our grandparents. She will also introduce our pictures.
No, yes, let's do it that way. Better. I need to be starter here. Put it, aim it over here. Over here. Right. Rabbi Levine, Rabbi Penner, Rabbi Dr. Jacob Schacter, members of the Jewish Center community, friends, ladies and gentlemen. It is gratifying to see all of you here tonight as ha-Atzma'aut and at the Lena and Harry Kabakov lecture, part of the Bella and Harry Wexner Kollel at Reeds and University. My grandparents, Harry and Lena Kabakov, Shalom, to whom this program is dedicated, emigrated from Russia to escape persecution and settled and moved to Columbus, Ohio. True to their roots, my grandparents believed in Ma'asim Tovim and Tzedakah. They were poor in property, but strong and large in spirit. My grandparents invited traveling Jewish scholars to stay at their home when they visited Columbus. They raised a family, worked through the Depression, sustained through their struggles by Judaism, by study, by hard work, and by learning. 24 years ago, my mother and I established the Bella and Harry Wexner Kollel at Yeshiva University. We hoped that the students would become examples of excellence and leadership, not just to the Jewish world, but to the greater world. And that they would be held in high esteem in their positions as scholars and rabbis. We continue today to work with Yeshiva University and REITs to achieve the objectives that we had envisioned in the very beginning, 24 years ago. As our world has become more complicated, so has the role of those called upon to provide solace and comfort to their flanks, while building community interspersed with inspired learning and substantial scholarship. This is the challenging job confronting rabbis today. You have demonstrated these extraordinary qualities and those of, in addition, and so important, of integrity, honesty, and scholarship, more than our speaker, Rabbi Jacob J. Schacter. He has the unique qualities of a phenomenal rabbi, scholar, and leader. Rabbi Schacter served as the rabbi of the Jewish Center for 19 years, during which the membership. Rabbi Schacter was a member of Yeshiva Torah Badad, received his PhD at Harvard, was the founding dean of the Rabbi Joseph B. Soloveitchik Institute in Boston. While at Harvard, he taught medieval Jewish history, 1977 to 1981. Today, Rabbi Schacter is the senior scholar, or a senior scholar at the Yeshiva University Center for the Jewish Future. Rabbi Schacter currently teaches 3 courses at Yeshiva University. One at Stern College, Jewish law, another at the Rabbinical School, and one more at Rebel Graduate School on Holocaust and Genocide Studies. Now, it is my great pleasure and honor to introduce to all of you, phenomenal scholar, Rabbi Schacter. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan, very much. Thank you very much, not just for the introduction. Thank you very much for so many Jewish causes all across the world that benefit so greatly from your help and your support. The university in particular is extremely grateful to you for being the guiding force behind our program. And your continued involvement is much appreciated. And we hope over the course of years, 24 years is a long time, you have merited the great kindness that you have bestowed upon us and continue to bestow upon us. The Baruch Hu God should give you strength and good health. Continue your exceptional work on behalf of us. I acknowledge Yossi Prager, who's very much probably blessed to have Yossi as a leading member of your team, and we're honored by his presence here. Bershus Marad Asra, Rabbi Levine. I left this congregation 22 years ago and walked into this room, and it just screams memories. I remember when this entire room was redone, and when the Aron Kodesh came in. I remember multiple dozens of events that took place in this room. As these walls talk, they would tell extraordinary, phenomenal stories. And I'm more touched than I thought I would be by return. And what's most precious, most special, is that the shul continues to grow and to flourish, now under the leadership of my extraordinarily beloved friend, Rabbi Yossi Levine, who together with Rachel lead this congregation with great dignity, with great professionalism, and for Hashem, great success. Rabbi Buchler, once a student, now a colleague. It's a pleasure to see you. I'm so glad that you're part of this team and are very much responsible for the ongoing excitement around this great show. Rishos Rabbi Penner, the Dean of REITs. I remember the day when Dr. Lamb got money from Maximarian Grill. Chala was the first to come to that chair, and he invited me to come to 101 Central Park West, and Max Grill came, and it was a big holiday, and we couldn't be more blessed at YU than having you at the helm of this very important institution at this most important critical moment
in our yeshiva's life and in the life of the unfolding of the American Jewish community. God should give you strength. It's a tough job. You're unbelievable. And those of us who know you are so impressed, and we feel so blessed. And I could go on, but I won't. Hey, Rabbi Ezra Schwartz, thank you so much for joining. Your role in the Kollel is indispensable, and your presence tonight is greatly appreciated. And to follow up on a previous conversation, I am actually honored that you have come this evening, to this event. Rabbi Neil Turk, thank you so much. We are blessed by you with a great team. I can't believe how many of you I know and remember. What's significant to me is I can't believe how many of you I don't know, which is actually a good sign. It means that the Baruch Hashem shul is growing in 22 years. Many people have joined the shul that weren't around when I was. And kol hakavod to you, kol hakavod to the leadership of the shul, the rabbinic leadership of the leadership. Tonight's discussion as we transition from Yom HaZikaron to Yom ha-Atzma'aut is very important. And it's particularly important because Israel and the resurgence of Jewish life and the excitement of Jewish life, the ongoing future for Jewish life is very important. For Lena and for Harry Abakov, who we remember this evening. We heard a little bit about them from their granddaughter, people who came to the United States with not a lot, but invested an enormous amount of effort and energy in Jewish life, in the sustaining Jewish life, and the continuing Jewish life. What more does that than thank God, thank God we have reached this day in the state of Israel. So there's a direct nexus in terms of the unfolding of the Jewish narrative in the life of the Kabbalah and the life of the United Israel. May it continue for many, many wonderful and important. I want to begin as I analyze the subject under discussion. That is, so what is the theological significance of the state of Israel? I want to begin with a story. About 12 years ago, my wife and I attended a conference that was sponsored by the Memorial Foundation for Jewish Culture in a conference center outside of Warsaw, Poland. One of the things that the Memorial Foundation does, it sponsors a subset called the Nachum Goldman Fellowship. They bring together young men and women of the ages 35 to 45 from all countries, and I mean all countries across the world. And there are about 50 of them who come to these conferences. My wife and I have attended about 10 of them, we've been all over. And this one happened to have been outside of Warsaw. They come from Scandinavia, they come from the former Soviet Union, they come from South America, they come from France, they come from England, Belgium, they come from Central America, even from Tehran, Iran. The Jews from Tehran, Iran, Jewish leaders who come to this. And it's remarkably inspiring to see this group. And my role is to teach them, to talk to them, to try to help them, to guide them, essentially not to get in the way of them sharing experiences with one another. So it's Friday night, we're sitting around the hours late, and we're sharing a little bit about what we do. There's a young Israeli by the name of Uriel Amdad. He shares the following. His job, he tells us, is to engage Israeli high school students who have just finished high school. And in the year before they go to the army, we call it a gap year, they spend with him, and his role is to try to help them understand why is it that they're about to enter into at least a 3-year time period of devoting their full lives to the defense of the state of Israel. Why is this important? And what do they learn about themselves in preparation for this? There's an entire curriculum. Part of the curriculum is he takes them to ha-Atzma'aut, Mount Herzl, into Yerushalayim. You come in, you make a right turn, you go over ha-Atzma'aut before you get to Bayit down on the left, you make a right there is ha-Atzma'aut. Ha-Atzma'aut is the 7th one. Ha-Atzma'aut is called ha-Atzma'aut because Theodore Herzl is buried there. He was brought there a couple of years after he died, some years after he died. And the presidents and prime ministers and their spouses are buried on ha-Atzma'aut. But what is most significant about it is that it is a military cemetery. It's 23,000 Israeli soldiers fought on ha-Atzma'aut. Yom HaZikaron, Yom HaLirachim. There were a lot of young soldiers who gave up. And Uriel tells us that part of his job is he takes them, he wants them to see these graves. He wants them to begin to understand what does it mean to sacrifice for an ideal that is so significant to them. What does it mean to give up one's life for the sake of an incredibly important idea? If you've ever been to the military cemetery, it's divided by campaign. So there's a 1948 section and a 1956 section and a 1967 section. And then there's a 1971, 72, 11 on and on. He takes them to the 1948 section. You walk into the cemetery, you make a left, and then you go straight. It's in that corner of the cemetery. And the 1948 section, he tells us, is divided by battles. And there is one section there that contains 70-something graves of soldiers who were killed fighting for the Castle in 1948. What is the Castle? You've seen it. You may not have recognized what it is. You leave Yerushalayim and you start winding down. And more recently, you know that there was a tunnel that was built that helps avoid some of the curves that we all had to go through. Right before you get into the tunnel, you look up on the left, there's a building in the distance. That's called the Castle. That was the main overlook of the road leading into Yerushalayim. And you understand that whoever had control over the Castle, had control over the road, had control over the city of Jerusalem. And the Arab armies were absolutely determined to conquer the Castle, take over the road, to strangle the city of Yerushalayim. And it was really in danger. 73-ish boys, they were old boys, gave up their lives to defend the Castle. They're walking around, he's telling them the story. And then they see a particular grave. Every single grave in the cemetery is exactly the same. The name of the soldier, the name of the parents of the soldier, the serial number of the soldier, and the date that the soldier was killed. Rank of the soldier. The rank could be, I don't know, here we call it in the United States a private. It could be a lieutenant colonel, it could be a general. The rank is there. The stone is exactly the same. Pillow. Long rectangular area on the bottom, nothing written on it. Then there's a little pillow that has all this information. They turn the corner. They see a stone that says Almoni. Almoni. Almoni, the date that he was killed. There's no serial number, there are no parents. Almoni and the date that he was killed, there's no rank. Two items on this thing. They try and figure this out. Almoni. Almoni means, we would say, John Doe. It's anonymous. We don't know who Almoni is. Almoni is unknown. Unknown. They turn to Uriel and they say to him, Uriel, how could this be? How could this be that in his name? Shalom. They couldn't figure this out. So Uriel tells us at 1 o'clock in the morning, an hour outside the house 10 years ago, that I explained to him that this Almoni is a survivor of the Holocaust. And this Almoni lost everything. He lost his parents, his siblings, his grandparents, his cousins, his entire community, and he crawled on his fingertips to come to the land of Israel. And as soon as he arrived in the land of Israel, in 1947, 1948, they gave him a gun. And they said, here's a gun, we need you to fight. I don't know if you realize that when the state of Israel was founded, celebrating the founding of the state of Israel, there were 600,000 Jews living in the state of Israel. 150,000 were Holocaust, roughly 25%. And they needed everyone to go and to fight. There was a danger. 100 million Arabs surrounding them, wanting to totally obliterate. Here's a gun, here's the trigger, here's a bullet, here's how you put the bullet in, go fight. And Almoni was killed fighting for the Palestinians. And the only ones who knew his name are the ones who are buried around him. They're the only ones who knew who he was. And when he was killed, nobody knew. Almoni and a date. I will tell you that 6 months ago, my last trip to Israel, 4 months ago, I went to look for Almoni. And Almoni is there. You're going to find it. You turn the corner, it's right at the corner. Almoni, it's shocking. These young chevra, these high school grads, said, me magia lako. Whoever comes here, whoever visits Almoni. Me omer kaddish b'shvilo. Me omer yom alei rachamim b'shvilo. Me zocher oto. If you're familiar, you know, when you go to the cemetery, so there are flowers on many different graves sometimes. There are parents, old parents, frustrated over the grave. It's gripping, and that's what happened today in Israel. Thousands and thousands. Who comes here? And that was the end. They just couldn't figure this out. And when Deepan thought the lesson was over, everybody went home. Uriel tells us, he gets a phone call. Uriel, Matzano et hamishpacha shelo. Uriel, we found this family. What, Temishu got in? What are you, crazy? What do you mean you found this family? How can you find this family? They said to him, Uriel, Matzano et hamishpacha shelo, anachnu hamishpacha shelo. We found his family. You know his family? We are his family. We decided that we are his family. And he told us that every year, every single year on his year, you know, Israeli soldiers, when they're done with the army, they're out of here. They're in Machu Picchu, and they're in Nepal, as far away as they could be. They're gone, they're done, they're in the outback of Australia. Every year on his yahrzeit. Minyan, the Chevra of that show, they say a kaddish for Almoni. Give up his life so that they and we can be free and proud. What brings us here tonight is Anachnu Ishbaha. We're in New York City. We're celebrating the founding of the state very far from here. It's not far. It's very close. Because we are one family. It's not just that we have family who live there. It's not just that we may have an apartment. It's not just that we go there for the Shalosh Regalim and we visit 6 times a year. It's even more than that. We are one family. So we're here today and we're here tonight to celebrate a cataclysmic event in modern Jewish history, in the totality of Jewish history, an event, a simcha, a celebration in our family. So what does the state of Israel mean to us in 2022? 70-something years since the founding of the state. So I understand that it has social significance, and it has economic significance, and it has political significance, and it's going through all kinds of challenges, both from without as well as from within. We've got a long way to go before we are where we hoped we probably would have and should have been by now. We got a long way to go. I was born after the founding of the state of Israel. I had no idea what a world could look like without the state of Israel. I have no idea. Come along with me for a moment for a thought experiment. Just imagine for a half a second, what would the Jewish world have looked like, and what would it look like if the state of Israel had been founded just 10 years before it was. Thousands of years, there's no civilization. 10 years, just 10 years. What about 1938 instead of 1940? It would be, and I think when you begin to see this, you understand the incredible gift and the blessing that we merit, the innate with our own eyes. We merit to see and to experience, visualize, and to be a part of in our own lives, in our own time, and in our own generation. The question of the theological significance of Israel is a little bit more complicated. There are a multiplicity of approaches, and I want to share one or two. In particular, I want to share a Jewish-centered story that directly relates to this question about the theological significance. There's a lot of Hebrew on the handout that I brought to you. Those of you who follow the Hebrew, great. I'll translate everything. The first text comes from a description of a conversation that took place right after the 6th Day War. So some of you were around after the 6th Day War. Many of you joined this humanity after the 6th Day War. I had just graduated from high school, and my parents decided to be present. And my parents and my sister and I went to Israel. We got to Israel 10 days after the end of the 6th Day War. We spent 6 weeks, 8 weeks in Yerushalayim and traveling around the country. It's hard for me now to imagine and to access the feelings that I had at 16 years old and totally overwhelmed. I remember the first Tisha B'Av. The first Tisha B'Av, after 19 years, he was able to go to the Kotel. When I came to the Kotel, I couldn't get to the Kotel. It was rubble in front of the Kotel. Today, you march right in, it's all smooth, it's got beautiful tiles. It was rubble. There were houses pretty much close to the Kotel, probably about an empty space, and the rest were houses. And they were totally demolished. All the houses were demolished. And in order to get to the Kotel, you needed to watch out that you can kill yourself on rubble, on wires, on stone, on sticks. It was, you had to gingerly make your way to the Kotel. When I got to the Kotel, there was a street sign. There was a street sign. You know, the street signs look like they're mosaic and tiles. It was in Arabic and English. Burak. Michael Lois up here. Now, Burak is the name of a magical mode of conveyance that brought Muhammad to Temple Mount way back in the 7th century. And it's on the wall. It's on the Kotel. The next day I came back, it was done. Don't look for it. You're not going to find it. It's not there. The Israelis very quickly got rid of it. I felt that Mashiach was coming. If you had asked me in July of 1967, a little kid, to go into a synagogue, to go to an Or Kodesh, and open it up, and put my hand on the Sefer Torah, and swear, that's a very serious, very serious. Put my hand on the Sefer Torah, I would have sworn that I hear the footsteps of Mashiach, and it's only a short matter of time. The level of euphoria, of the miracle of the system is absolutely indescribable. Indescribable. It's hard for me to access. It's harder and harder for me to access. I mamish would have sworn that Mashiach. This conversation takes place a couple of weeks after the end of the war. And there are some students of Tzvi Yehuda Kook, who was the Rosh Yeshiva, the head of the Yeshiva of was a very ardent Messianic Zionist. In 1953, Rabbi Kook wrote an article in ha-Atzma'aut, which is the religious Zionist newspaper. What do you mean, what do you mean the beginning of the redemption. What do you mean, Reshit Tzmichat Geulatenu? It's the beginning of the flower. We're already halfway there. We passed the beginning. It's not the beginning. We're well underway. 1953, and now, miracle of the 6-Day War. My God, I remember lying in bed. I was in Yeshiva in Philadelphia. We were not allowed to have transistor radios. The 6-Day War is going on. We smuggled them in. And I'm lying in bed, faking it, making believe that I'm trying to sleep. And under my pillow, I hear Jay Lushin's HaKotel B'Yadenu, Har HaBayit B'Yadenu. I heard Rabbi Goren blow the shofar at the Kotel. I heard it on the radio. And Rabbi Tzvi Yehuda Cook is on fire from the messages, on fire from the redemptive moment that is now unfolding before everyone's eyes in the state of Israel. And his students come to leaders, political leaders of the religious Zionist party, Moshe Chaim Shapiro, Yitzchak Raphael, and say to them, you must go to the government and you must tell them, under absolutely no circumstances is any territory allowed to be given back. God gave the Jewish people a gift. God doesn't take anything back that God gives. It's an Isser D'Oraita. It's a biblical prohibition to give anything back. This is ours. Mashiach is coming. We hear the footsteps. We're just going to get stronger and stronger. And they told these young men that you're being naive. This is all in the first hand. You're being naive because you don't realize it's not so simple. The state of Israel lives in a community of nations. The state of Israel lives in a world. The state of Israel can't just do what it wants. It has to take into consideration things that are going around. And they said absolutely not. And I'm going to read at the bottom, the last 2-3 lines, and translate I believe in absolute faith. If God gave us God will never take it out and away from us. And therefore we must keep this. And at the end of the day, it's not for the government of Israel to decide, because God already designed. So in the world of Messianics, this is a very powerful expression. The prayer for the government, as you know, the prayer for the government of Israel contains the phrase, the beginning of the flower of the redemption. I have looked far and wide to find any precedents for that phrase. Was this made up by Rabbi Herzog in conjunction with Shai Agnon, Shmuel Yosef Agnon, famous Hebrew short story writer, novelist? The two of them collaborated. Well, who made up this phrase? And I can't find it. And maybe one of the reasons why I came, Susan, and I thank you for giving me the opportunity, is to ask any of you for fun. Reshit Tzmichat Geulatenu. Anywhere before this prayer, I will give you a bracha, I will give you a hug, I will do whatever I can to indicate my incredible gratitude. The closest that I got was Rav Kook. Second entry on page 1, Reshit Tzmichat Yeshuat Yisrael. Beginning sounds pretty close, but it's not exact. Not Reshit Tzmichat Geulatenu. Reshit Tzmichat, the beginning of the flowering of the salvation of Israel. Then another text, Reshit Tzmichat Geulat Amen. It's a little bit closer, but it's not exactly so. As the founding of the state of Israel was getting closer, I found a letter on the right side of page 2. It was written by the Rabbi Yitzchak Isaac Halevi Chatzah. Tried out for the job of chief rabbi of Tel Aviv in 1935, did not get the job. And then in 1939, he succeeded Rabbi Kook, the legendary Rabbi Kook, as the Ashkenazi chief rabbi of Israel. And he writes a letter to Shlomo Zalman Shraga. Shlomo Zalman Shraga was a very significant and important leader of the religious side, who was then in New York City drumming up support among the United Nations for getting behind Israel when Ben Gurion, the prime minister, would get around to announcing the founding of the state of Israel. We're now in December 1947, and these politics try to make sure that he gets the support of the international community. And Rabbi Herzog, who's living in Jerusalem, sends him a letter. Shalom ad ha'olam. Hi, hello. Kibalti mivrako. I received your mivrak. What's a mivrak? I asked my students, what's a mivrak? They have no idea. So I tell them, a mivrak is a telegram. And they have no idea. No, it's a whole different way. Like we had this. I spent a year in Israel, a year and a half in Israel, in 1968, 1969. I spoke to my parents once the entire year. And the way I spoke to them was I had to make an appointment. The main post office of Yafo, 4 months before I wanted to have that conversation. And I get a date. I'm there 4 hours before because God knows what's going to happen. Finally, 2 hours after the time they call me in, and I pick up the thing, and all I hear is a word, Gunish with Gunish. This is my one bite at this apple. They can't hear me, I can't hear them. And that was it. Today, you have children and grandchildren. You've been to Israel. If you don't call every 6 minutes, every day they're panicking. Hey, they're on the radio, maybe it's an event, episode. They have no idea what a mizrach is. So if you're sitting next to somebody who doesn't know, I'll explain. I received your telegram. And I thank you very, very much. Like you, I too. We are confident with the help of God. Notice the phrase, Tzur Yisrael v'Go'alo. That is familiar to us from the Kibbutz B'Shlomo. Baruch Hu she'yanu b'shlav zeh, thank God we've reached this stage. Afal Pisha Adayin Ino Ela Atchalta V'Gula, December of 1947, even though this is only the beginning of the redemption. And maybe even Ulai Rak Atchalta De Atchalta. Maybe it's not even the beginning. Maybe we haven't even begun yet. Maybe all we are, or all that we've achieved, is the beginning of the new. December 1947. How do you say beginning? The beginning in Hebrew? Reshit Tzmichat Geulah. And so, by stating this, you sign on, whether you recite it out loud or whether you're standing when Rabbi, the Gabbai, the Chazan, the president, somebody recites it. You're essentially signing on that you do think that there is theological significance in the state of Israel, that in fact it is part of the messianic unfolding, and that in fact the messianic train has left us. Now I'm going to tell you a Jewish central story. I became the rabbi in November of 1981. Crazy. Like I was 4 years old. Rabbi in the Jewish center. Actually, I wasn't too much older than 4 years. My first Shabbos. I'm still trying to figure out where to stick myself wearing that top hat on my head that I had no idea what's going on. Wearing the starchy thing, the stripes, and I have no idea. And I have a sermon to give. I didn't know. God should forgive me. I was busy memorizing, thinking through my sermon. I didn't hear a word of the Torah. Thinking the sermon. First Shabbos. Can't blow it. And then after the Komporkon towards the Ashrei, the rabbi comes over, Lay Peter Lunzer. He hands me a piece of paper and he says, this is the prayer for the government. When they finish Ashrei, you're going to get up and you're going to read the prayer. I look at the prayer for the government, I'll translate it. So the Gavar Fenster in the which means, oh my God, I never saw this. This is the prayer for the government. I have no idea what this is. I never saw it. But now we have about 69 seconds before I have to get up and say it. So I can't ask Peter Lunzer, I can't ask Rabbi Young, who's sitting over here, Lamb, who's sitting over there. What is this? All I wanted to do was not blow it and not mess up the Hebrew. When I read it, my first Shabbos, which I can't read Hebrew, this is a bad problem. So all I'm doing now is down to 40 seconds. And I'm hazarding over just reading it and reading it and reading it so it should be comfortable. I get up, I read it. Baruch Hashem, God was good. It actually came out flawlessly. And After davening, I go to davening. Look on the top left-hand side of page 3. This is the prayer at the end. Yilal Shalom Medinat Israel, prayer for the state of Israel. Dr. Lamb put together a little booklet that I'm assuming the shul still uses for Yom ha-Atzma'aut, for Yerushalayim, for Yom HaShoah. And this is the prayer for the government, and this is what they gave me. And I said it because I had to say it. Baruch Hashem, I said it okay. And I'm looking at it, and what was of great significance to me is not what it said, but what it didn't say. What's not in this tefillah, now, what's not in this tefillah is the phrase "Reshit Tzmicha." Okay, there is 0 reference to Israel at all associated with messianism. 0. In the standard prayer for the government that was proposed by the chief, not just Reshit Tzmicha, like any, but if you do a close parsing of the phrases of the rest of it, all over the place there is messianism. There is 0 messianism. I go over to Dr. Lamb after that. I say, they gave me this thing. I read it because I read it. That's the backstory. He said, well, we don't say Reshit Tzmicha. I don't believe the state of Israel has anything messianism. That was the first time I ever heard something like that in my whole life. Hearing about this. So I'm sort of nonplussed. I'm taking it back. He said, well, I wrote about this. Go take a look at an article. I had a debate with Rabbi Shimon's heroes and Rabbi Israel. We had a discussion. Magazine, go take a look at it and discuss it. I said, okay, that's great. That's fine. Now I'm starting to stutter. My first shot is, I say to him, I don't know, maybe, sure, but I'm thinking, maybe, I don't know if I'm really comfortable. Why don't we say whatever the whole rest of the world says? The whole rest of the world. Why don't we say it? It made like 2 minutes to get it out. Because everyone constantly, if you know anything about the Jewish center, it's a place of truth. You know this. Here, this is like a big twisting, turning, and pulling. And he says to me, Rabbi Schacter, you ever call me Rabbi Schacter? You are now the rabbi of the shul. You made the decision. The decision you made, I will support it. You can only begin to imagine the kind of gift that was a little fisher like me, who just became the rabbi at the age of 30 years old. You are the rabbi, I will support you. Ergo, the next Shabbos, Don was the old Jewish center tradition, and from the third Shabbos in November 1981, so it still goes on till today. I want to bring to your attention Dr. Lamb's argument. We still live this institution and Yeshiva University and modern Orthodoxy and religious Zionism under the aura of this incredible human being. And we're still destroyed over his guessing, over Mindy's guessing, his wife's guessing. So it's hard to imagine. He wasn't well at the end of his life. And lived together with his wife on 87th, 88th in Central Park West. And I made it my business about 4 times a year to visit. Sometimes he recognized me, sometimes he didn't. But Mindy was right there, and she was incredibly gracious. Every time he was wearing a white shirt, and tie, sitting at the table. And I would talk to him and tell him stories. Every time I left, I took him by the hand, in the eye, and I said, Dr. Lamb, I'm here. I'm here on behalf of the Jewish community. Thank you. was we stand on your shoulders. He nodded, and I cried. Dr. Lamb argued against saying Reshit Simcha. Bottom of page 2. This is from his debate. 5 minutes. Statement of uncertainty, not disbelief. I must make clear. And so what I feel obligated to do this evening is to present a complex picture. It's not so partial, it's not obvious. I do say there should be happening. For me, this is an unbelievable miracle. There are those who don't, and not only outside, but even within the religious science. Just don't feel comfortable associating any messianic overtones or undertones with the state of Israel. Wrote Dr. Lamb, I must make clear that I do not deny that ours is an era of insipid messianic. I'm not saying it's not. What I am saying is that I do not know what there is or not. That I challenge the certainty of those who assert that knowledge. How do you know? If you believe it, it's very important, it's very significant. But how do you know? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, you don't know. I consider it spiritually presumptuous to declare, without benefit of prophetic inspiration, that we are privy to divine secrets. How do we know what God has in mind? We don't know anything about what God has in mind. The ways of God in history are too wondrous, too mysterious. I think that to deny it, to assert that we are in a particular phase of a preordained drama. My deep commitment, next paragraph, my commitment to the state of Israel does not require messianic presuppositions. You shouldn't think that just because you're not ready to sign on and say, shame on you, you're not a card-carrying religious Zionist. No. Be a ganz fine, wonderful religious Zionist, not necessarily associate messianism with Israel. That commitment, my commitment to the state of Israel, was forged in the fires of the crematoria and the hatred of by the civilized so-called countries of the West, and the love of Eretz Yisrael and Am Yisrael, which are the purpose of the Eretz Yisrael, in the expectation that Torah has a better chance of Israel today than in the diaspora. Therefore, especially because I can get along without the messianic undergirding for my love of Israel, I will not risk a premature messianism which is too histories and lead to psychological spiritual. I'm not saying it's not, but I cannot say with all certainty that in fact it is. The Lamb came by this honesty because his Rebbe, Rabbi Jacob J, was also, I'm going to use the word unalterably, opposed to any messianic notion tied in with the state of Israel. Rabbi Soloveitchik famously wrote about knocks. God is knocking at the door of the Jewish people. Knocks. Rabbi Soloveitchik said, God founded the state of Israel. Rabbi Soloveitchik said, this is a miracle. All true, but nothing messianic. And so that's their position. This congregation has voted with health and with the liturgy that has adopted for Shabbos in November of 1981 to recite Avinu Shebashamayim Yisrael Yisrael V'Ra'alav Berechet Medinat Yisrael Reshit Tzmicha. And I conclude with where I begin, expressing gratitude. Thank you so much. It is incredibly touching that you do this for your group. We liked our grandparents, nice people, a long time. Read your mind, they matter to you. And you carry their lesson and their message with you. That's what animates your lives. Because what they want is what you want. That is, putting one foot in front of another. And I care. I care about the state of Israel. I care about the future. I am going to hitch my wagon Jewish destiny. That's what you do. That's what your grandparents told you. And so we are honored this evening. I am personally honored. I have been designated who beats leadership. I'm not sure, but Either way, I'm honored. I have been designated to deliver this lecture. Memory be for a blessing. May we celebrate the state of Israel. Many incredibly special and wonderful years. Thank you so much.
I want to thank Rabbi Schacter for his incredibly inspiring words. Ask everyone now to join us in the Koran Siddur on page 911. If you do not yet have a Siddur, find one in the back of the room. They're being handed out. Once again, 911. That was 9:17. Here with Myriam on 243.
ברוך הבא ברבן מלך נדבר בגיר בלשיב בבליר כל חומתו אדוני השיעה המלך יעננו ביום קרינו ברכו את אדוני מבורך ברוך אדוני המבורך לעולם וברכתו אדוני אלינו מלך העולם אשר בקרוב הריב הרבים وما بيوم ما بيلادا بدير من يوم بلادا درايت وشما الخبك يام تميدين لا خلينو للغوين برخاتو أدوناي هماري بربي يم خير مرخ من بمنك يوم أمادا بيابات خالت وسير من اليولامي برخاتو أدوناي أوهيب عمو يسرائيل أدوناي 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 لو يخمم سمنا كسر فقيام عليكم وما خطب برسان قبلوا علي أمر بني إسرائيل خانوا شيرا بسمخة ربا في أمر خلام میخوام خبری ندونم میخوام خدا در بخودش رفیقات و سیفله ملخوت فرو بنه خبکی ایم میفرماشه زیلی انوبی امرو ادوناگی نخلیدانه بنمار کی فدادمت یعقوب و گلامی الحزق میمنو برخات و ادونای گال یسرائیل ושמור צאתנו אל החיים ולשלום יתהווה אדולם ברוכת אדוני שומר עמו ישראל ברוך לעולם אמן אמן יום חושך היום יעצים לך בחבר כי אין מלך אלא אתה ברוך אתה אדוני המלך בכבודו תמיד ימלך עלינו ללבב ויעקב מעשה יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה יעמד ורק יתגל נדבך וזה בחי חנך ובחנך חנך בית ישראל ועגלה בזמן קריב עם רועבי Ishmir Abba Mevorach, Lilmei Yipurach, Ishtabach Vitzbar Vitzman Vitznose, Vidadar Vitzale, Vitzalal Shmeri Kudesh Shaberechu, Liela Miko Bechadav Shiratat, Vishbechat Menechem Atadamiran Be'Abba Ve'Ruave. יתגדל ויקדש מרבה, ויאמר דברי כתב המחמח ותה בחיפה נמוכן בחרף בית ישראל בעגלה ובזמן קרי ואמרו אמן. איש מרבה מברך, וילנו מהוויה יברך, ישתבח ויתבר ויתרומם ויתנשא, ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתעלש מנקודשה ברכו, לילה מקובחדה ושירתה, תשבחת ונחמת אדם מרד מעלמה ואמרו אמן. תזכבה סלטון ואתון לכובד ישראל קדם אבוני בשמי ואמרו אמן. יש למרבה משמיים וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום מרמיו, ויעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. ונאמר וידן אל המלך כל הארץ ויאמרו יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו אחד.